Okay, not knowing whether I should have read all the introductions and whatnot, I do want to give credit to these people for their words. We are continuing. Introduction. This is page 23. Life in the midst of battle. John Owen's Approach to Sin, Temptation, and the Christian Life by Kelly M. Kapik. Quote, "Be killing sin or it will be killing you." End quote. That's a quote from John Owen, actually. Section. Why read John Owen? Sitting across from me in our London flat with warm tea in her hand and shortbread on the table, my wife had a revelation. During recent conversations, we had been praying that God would provide a mentor for me while I was working on my PhD. Someone who would ask the hard questions, challenge my thinking and living, and consistently point me to the love of the Father. As we sat talking that morning in what had become normal language around our home, I began another sentence with, "Do you know what Owen said yesterday?" Stopping me, Tabitha interjected, "You are being mentored." Listen to how you refer to John Owen as if he were still alive. He is your mentor. She was right. Although Owen had been dead for centuries, I found myself in almost daily dialogue with this prominent Puritan whose thought was serving as the object of my doctoral studies. While recognizing the cultural and historical difference between Owen's time and my own was of vital importance for my academic research, still I was often drawn into a living dialogue with this intriguing man. Sometimes I found myself frustrated with his methods or conclusions, but very often his insights simply captured me. His words would stir me to the point of honest self-examination and an ever-growing appreciation for the glory and love of God. I can recall many a time when I would have to stop reading, stand up, and just walk around for a while, trying to digest a profound sentence. While a person from another century cannot serve as a replacement for living and breathing fellowship, I have learned the value of listening to the saints of old, and this Puritan theologian is certainly a voice worth hearing. I sometimes think of Dr. John Owen as a perceptive physician who delivers both a terrifying diagnosis and the means of a miraculous cure. John Owen was born in the year of William Shakespeare's death, 1616, and his life paralleled an exciting and tumultuous century in Britain. Before he died in 1683, Owen had experienced life as an army chaplain, a political insider, vice-chancellor of Oxford, a leading Puritan theologian, faithful pastor, father, and husband. He had also known great personal loss. Though he had 11 children with his first wife, only one of them survived beyond adolescence. The one girl who did survive ended up returning to live with her father after her marriage collapsed, and while in his home, she died of consumption. Such painful experience cannot help but leave a deep imprint on a person. On the professional level, John Owen's career had reached great heights, such as preaching before Parliament, leading Oxford University, and having friendships with those in the highest positions of authority, including Oliver Cromwell. Yet he also lived through the loss of power and position, as his country moved away from a Puritan-influenced government back to a country led by a king who was less than excited about the Puritan ideals. Throughout the various seasons of his life, Owen proved himself a most able author. The authoritative 19th century edition of his works filled 24 tightly printed volumes. Amid his extensive writings, which include biblical commentaries and exhausting treatments of doctrines like justification and the atonement, Owen also produced devotional literature that quickly became beloved. In the volume you are reading, we have selected 3 of his classics on spirituality. Although it needs to be said that he viewed all of his discourses as spiritual exercises, and not as something void of practical import. In these 3 particular works, we find Owen's detailed reflections on sin, temptation, and the believer's call to holiness. Check time. 5 minutes. Continue. In 1656, Owen first published Of the Mortification of Sin in Believers. In 1658, that volume was slightly revised, and another short treatise of temptation, the nature and power of it, was also printed. During the time that these 2 books were published, Owen was still serving as Dean of Christ Church, Oxford University, and the substance of both discourses grew out of brief sermons that Owen delivered during his tenure there. Young students were most likely the bulk of his original audience. Owen had entered Queen's College, Oxford, as a student at the age of 12, which was not uncommon for the time. One consequence of addressing this youthful audience seems to be that his reflections tend toward the concrete and practical, emphasizing the particular rather than lingering too long on the abstract. Here were young people who were beginning to experience the complexity of sin and self, and Owen was compelled to help. Crucial to resisting sin and temptation, according to Owen, was an understanding of what you were fighting. Although written a decade later, Owen's explorations on these practical subjects are further unpacked in his book, The Nature, Power, Deceit, and Prevalency of Indwelling Sin, 1667. Here Owen focuses on the power of sin not as it exists out there, but as it exists within a person. By the time this volume was published, Owen's context had significantly changed. He had been removed from the academic setting, had watched the return of Charles II, and had personally witnessed the governmental crackdown on nonconformist Puritan preachers. But for Owen, circumstances, whether amiable or painful, were not an excuse to stop resisting sin. The call of holiness was a call from God himself, and thus not contingent upon the state of affairs in which one finds himself. Christians are called to war against sin. According to Owen, this means they are called to learn the art of battle, which includes understanding the nature of sin, the complexity of the human heart, and the goodness and provision of God. Following a classic stream of orthodox theology, Owen argues that humility is crucial to growth in the Christian life, and proper humility comes from a, quote, due consideration, unquote, both of God and of oneself. Only from this perspective can one be in a right position to approach the call to holiness. We got to make another section.